All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Neil Ryan, the Executive Director of Keep Massachusetts Beautiful. And today I have Waneta Trabert with me. Waneta is the chair of the Mass Product Stewardship Council, which is a subcommittee of the nonprofit MassRecycle. So welcome, Waneta.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and today we're going to talk about extended producer responsibility, otherwise known as EPR, and how this philosophy, methodology of managing waste may help reduce the amount of waste here in Massachusetts, improve recycling, and hopefully even reduce the amount of litter that we see out there. So to get started, Waneta, could you just tell us what is the definition of extended producer responsibility?
Yeah, so I'll start with product stewardship. So we're called the Product Stewardship Council, and product stewardship is a broad concept of any entity within a value chain taking ownership and being a good steward of their portion of that. So the way we're looking at it is looking specifically at like the producer or original manufacturer of a product or even packaging to be a good steward of what they're putting out into the marketplace throughout its life cycle. But this could take on other forms. Product stewardship could include how Staples is a good steward by taking printer cartridges in for recycling. So that's just kind of an added service that they do voluntarily. No one's forcing their hand. Extended producer responsibility is I would say a specific policy tool within the umbrella of product stewardship. And extended producer responsibility is defined as a law that does force the hand of an entity to take ownership of their product or, again, packaging, something that they're putting out into the marketplace beyond what they are currently doing. And so this could look like an extended producer responsibility law would be, so one that we're discussing is paint. In 10 states and the District of Columbia, paint manufacturers are obligated by law to collect unwanted paint and set up the collection network and then pay for that. And so then you get into different funding mechanisms and different ways that these laws can be written for what they include, what they don't include. And referencing to litter, I will say that in California, they passed a bill last year that is to address packaging and paper products. And there's actually a litter like abatement, or I think it's called litter abatement in their law that will create funding from the original manufacturers to pay for litter cleanups. And that's like, I would say, a broader umbrella than we've seen before. So it's a pretty exciting kind of addition to that extended producer responsibility tool.
Yeah. So if I understand it correctly, EPR, the general philosophy is that companies need to have a role in the entire life cycle of their product, from production to disposal or recycling versus just putting it out there. And currently, we as taxpayers in Massachusetts, we all pay property taxes, or you may have a separate trash fee in your town. So the companies, make their product, sell it, make their profits. I'm not against capitalism, so no problem there. But then the cost of managing the waste, we're all paying for that, and they are not.
Yes.
So is it accurate to say EPR basically it forces the companies to have a role in paying for the disposal or recycling, and maybe design their products better in the first place so that there is less waste and things, or that things could be recycled?
Yes, that's definitely a goal of an EPR system, is to have design, I would say kind of like design for repairability or longevity to be baked into the system. And by putting a fee on the product or again, packaging that would be put out into the marketplace, it creates a funding mechanism to pay for that. sorry, I'm at a loss for words. What you were just saying about having there be responsibility throughout the life cycle is exactly right. And it's definitely looked at as leveling the playing field and having the producers take more responsibility for the externalities that are happening right now, where taxpayers are paying for collection of waste and recycling systems where it's not evenly balanced. So I think a good example is you have two households, one sets out a half full trash can each week and pays the exact same amount as the neighbor that sets out 3 full trash cans a week. If you don't have like a pay as you throw system in your community. And so this really puts the funding for that system kind of upfront, baked into the purchase price of the item. And so the consumer of that item is paying for it instead of all of us as taxpayers paying like a blanket or even cost for it.
Okay, so let's use paint as an example. You mentioned that, and that 10 other states are already doing this. And I know that there's been a bill for many years here in Massachusetts, but just can't seem to get over the finish line. So how would it work for paint? So I go and buy a gallon of paint. Take me through what would happen from there.
Yes. So the system right now is that you go and buy paint and then you use what you need to, and then the probably, quarter to a half can sits on your shelf in your basement for the next 10 years because you don't really know what to do with it. And at least at first you think, oh, well, I'll keep it for touch-ups, etc. But pretty soon that paint turns into just sitting there and you don't know what to do with it. What the paint bill would do is create a system. It's known as paint care in other states. The paint industry is very unique in that they've come to the table and they actually advocate for this bill. They are in favor of it. They think it's a good system and they want to be that kind of entity that is a good steward of their product. And so what would happen if this law were to be passed is that a point of sale fee, a visible fee, is put onto the purchase of new paint. And then that is done for a period of time. And I think this is developed in regulation, whether it's like 6 or 12 months. You accumulate a fund, and in the background, you're setting up a collection network, the Paint Care Group, which is a nonprofit stewardship organization for the paint industry. They would actually be overseeing the fee that comes in, and then using that money to set up collection points and pay for the actual collections of old paint once that starts. But this would offer a free and convenient way to dispose of old paint. And right now the system is, it sits on your basement shelf and you don't know what to do with it, but something forces your hand eventually and you need to get rid of it. And right now, latex paint, the guidance is to dry it out and put it in with your household trash. And then you as the homeowner resident that has paint, need to decide or look at your paint can labels and figure out if it's flammable paint or latex paint. And it's quite confusing.
Or oil-based, right?
Exactly. The oil-based paint that's flammable. If it's flammable paint, it needs to go to a household hazardous waste event. And if it's latex paint, it's non-hazardous, water-based. It can just go in the trash, but it's just kind of a pain in the butt to deal with. And so this would create a system where every single collection point would take both types of paint, no questions asked, and it would just get handled.
And would that be the store itself? I mean, you could just bring it back to the store, or
in those other states that are operating, about 70% of the collection locations are small paint retail stores. So your Sherwin-Williams and your
Benjamin Moore,
exactly. Yeah. And we've heard from a couple of paint retailers, those smaller paint retailers in Massachusetts, that they would be in support of this. And in other states, they like the business, the foot traffic that it brings in.
Yeah.
We know that the big box stores don't participate in that system. And really the other 30% of collection points is basically going to be like municipal transfer stations, recycling centers, even
Right.
household hazardous waste days would accept the paint. And then what's nice for the municipality is that they would actually get reimbursed for any costs that they incur, and then like the pickup for that material is just free.
All right. Okay, so that seems doable. Now you said, I think you used the word free somewhere, but technically you are paying a fee when you buy the paint. So what's the typical fee? You know, if
Yeah,
the gallon of
so
paint is now $40 or whatever it is.
that's a great question. The fees in the existing programs range between 75 and 95 cents per gallon.
Okay. But then you get the convenience of, you don't have to, wait for that one day a year when you have the household waste collection, which may or may not coincide with your schedule. And even if, I know they say you can throw latex paint in your trash, but a lot of our waste here in Massachusetts gets incinerated. I can't imagine that that's necessarily a good thing to have that paint being
It's not
incinerated.
it's certainly not a desirable thing for the waste to energy facilities. They're not getting any value out of it. There's definitely a higher use for it. 70% of the latex paint that is collected through these programs, the Paint Care program in other states, is able to be recycled into new paint. So that's like another kind of added environmental benefit.
Okay.
And there's even a paint recycler that is based in Massachusetts in Hanover called Recolor, who does work with municipalities. It costs money for us to hire. I also work for the city of Newton, so we've hired Recolor to come in and do a latex paint collection for recycling of it, but it costs us money to do that right now. And with this program, we wouldn't need to pay for it.
Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about consumer packaging. So, as we all know, we've got so much of it when we go to the market, everything's packaged in plastic, sometimes excessive amounts of plastic. One that personal pet peeve is the black plastic that a lot of people are not aware is not recyclable here in Massachusetts at the facilities, because the black plastic on a black conveyor belt, the machines that read the codes can't pick it up. And yet, takeout containers have that black plastic bottom. Rotisserie chickens, a lot of meats have the black plastic. Like recently I purchased takeout food and it was in a white recyclable carton. I was like, wow, brilliant. It's recyclable now. So I know that the state of Maine passed a bill for extended producer responsibility for consumer packaging. Can you give a brief overview of how that works and how that might work here in Massachusetts?
I will try to be brief, but it does get into like it's a more complex mechanism. And so there's two bills right now in Massachusetts. I'm more familiar with one of those bills. And the way that it would work is that the producers of the packaging, so it would be like consumer brands, they would be responsible for paying a small fee into a fund that is overseen by a producer responsibility organization, which is always required to be a nonprofit. The producer responsibility organization oversees those funds and then would reimburse municipal recycling costs based on different factors. So I'm sure, population, and I don't think it would just be like a blanket, oh, your bill is covered, because we all know that within the waste system, kind of billing and pricing, there's no two communities are alike. There's no apples to apples comparison to be made. But I'm sure that they would come up with some level of criteria. For example, if you have weekly service with a 64-gallon cart or 96-gallon cart or something like that, they would figure out some reimbursement rate for your recycling based on percentages of different materials that are in that recycling stream. And so that's kind of the basic premise. So the individual resident / consumer would not really see or be part of the financing system. It would really be kind of behind the scenes. There would not be a point of sale fee because it's really just like fractions of a cent on every piece of packaging. And so instead it would be an internalized funding mechanism. And what we would hope that would do is that it would incentivize producers to use packaging that is more recyclable, again, maybe reusable. Some type of incentive can be baked into the fees on each type of packaging, to look at things from like a life cycle analysis perspective.
So maybe like companies would be incentivized to not use black plastic.
Exactly. That can be included in the language of either the law or the regulations that would be developed, which is the stage that Maine is in right now. So there's 4 states that have passed such a law. It's Maine, Oregon, California, and Colorado. And 2 of those states passed in 2021, and 2 of them passed last year in 2022. But we don't expect any of those laws to be online until like 2025. It's going to take like 3 years to develop all the regulations and kind of systems to get this up and running. And to give a broader perspective, this is how this policy mechanism, extended producer responsibility for packaging, is how Europe has much higher recycling rates than the United States does. And there's some countries that have as high as an 80 to 90% recycling rate. I think Belgium is somewhere in that 80 to 90% range. And it's because they now have had an EPR system for packaging for 20 or 30 years. So it's much more evolved. These 4 states that have passed this law are the first, it's the first in the US to do that. There's some Canadian provinces that also use this mechanism to pay for their recycling systems. The most recent was British Columbia, going online in 2014. And that program has been really successful in both increasing their recycling rates and capturing material, and just like creating more efficiency across the entire province, which we all hopefully know a map that British Columbia is much, much bigger than Massachusetts. So I would love to see more efficiency be created within the system in Massachusetts, because right now I would describe it as, there's 351 municipalities. Most of us are handling our own waste. There's some districts that are created handling the waste, but really it's a lot of recreating the wheel for very, very small amounts of land. Sorry, right. I'm not able to silence my phone, so we're just.
That's okay. And I saw in your presentation recently that you gave a chart that showed EPR laws in New England and how Massachusetts compares to some of our neighbors. And from what I saw, we only have, I believe, 2 EPR laws on the books here in Massachusetts. So we're correct. Lagging even our New England neighbors, never mind Europe and the rest of the world.
Yes, correct. It's a great point. So I can probably find that slide pretty quick and share it. So we in Massachusetts have 2 active EPR laws. We had a 3rd EPR law that has already come and gone, so I don't really count it anymore. And that was for pharmaceuticals. Sorry, let me just share this. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Okay, so we see that Maine has really taken a foothold in adopting this as a policy mechanism that they see as a benefit for their state. They have 9 EPR laws, and again, the one for packaging is not going to be in effect until 2025, but they have other laws, including electronics, paint. I believe they have a battery law. Same with Vermont. They have both of those as well. And
what are the 2 we have here in Massachusetts currently?
So the 2 we have, the bottle bill is considered an extended producer responsibility law. Okay. And there is a law regarding mercury switches, like auto switches. Yeah. That they need to be collected. But again, that's not very consumer facing. It's definitely more so for like an auto body garage, that type of thing.
Right. So we're not exactly setting the world on fire when in regards to EPR. What are some of the other bills that are being considered? You mentioned consumer packaging. Are there other products that are kind of ripe for an EPR law?
Yeah, so we found that this policy mechanism, the greater we, have found that this policy mechanism works particularly well for different material streams. And so paint is one that I think this works very well for. It's a very kind of like narrow scope of a material. Mattresses is something in the state of Massachusetts that has, I would say, been in the eye of the Department of Environmental Protection for a while. They worked to incentivize the development of a mattress recycling system by having a mattress recycling grant program starting in 2018. And then after the kind of infrastructure was built up to recycle mattresses, there was a disposal ban put in place last fall. And so now the funding for recycling of mattresses, it is more expensive than to dispose them. And I would say that's generally true for for most of these products. The funding mechanism right now is either on the municipalities to have absorbed that cost or to put it back onto the resident to pay for getting rid of a mattress. So in Newton, for example, it used to be that mattresses were disposed as trash and it cost $20 to get picked up at the curb. And that was your only option. We don't have a drop-off option for bulky items here. And now for mattress recycling collection and like the transportation of them, it's $60 to get it picked up at the curb. And that's for a mattress, it's $60. And if you also have a box spring, it's another $60. We do have a drop-off option now for mattresses and box springs, and that's $35. But as you can see, it's much higher than the $20 that it was. And then there's other communities that chose not to put that fee out into like a public facing fee and instead absorbed it within their operating budgets from property taxes. But of course, we know that there's limits to how big those budgets are. So I would say that an EPR system would, again, put the fee up front. So it operates very much like the paint model that I explained before, where there would be a visible fee at the point of sale for new mattresses. And then that pays for all of these older, and they're called legacy mattresses, legacy items, to pay for the kind of like the glut of what is out there.
Yeah. And I think I saw in your presentation, like in some of the neighboring states, that fee was relatively modest. It was like $15 or 20 or 10 in some states.
Yes,
is that right?
Yeah.
So that would be a lower cost option than the current system that people are. I know we've seen an uptick in illegal dumping of mattresses with this new ban on disposal because some people don't want to pay those costs. So it's just a separate issue. But all right, so it seems like EPR can work. What do opponents say to this general philosophy of, do they have a rational argument, or in your opinion, or what, why would anyone be against this, I guess?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say it depends on which material stream you're talking about for kind of what the arguments are, but I'll give the packaging example. So in Maine, Maine was the first state to pass this bill, which is just really impressive. I think several of us at the time thought it would be, 5 more years before a law like that would get passed. But there was a lot of opposition from industry, and even I would describe them as fear tactics, explaining that if this system were to be put in place, that it would actually raise consumer prices by a noticeable amount. And there's a report that was done by, I would describe it as a biased organization, that said, consumer costs would go up by some significant number, like 5 or 10%. And so that was a consideration by the Maine legislature. But I would say ultimately there's a lot of proven models out there that their prices are not any higher than, you know, the neighboring state or province or, you know, European nation. So that's kind of dispelled just with the existing systems that are out there. Another criticism or kind of opposition argument is that this is a tax, especially for those visible fees, like for paint and for mattresses. That it's like, oh, we're just taxing people. I think it's easy to delineate between a tax and like a fee that goes to a specific fund that is only going to be used for a very narrow scope of management of that material type. But I do see kind of at the outset how legislators would see it, or at least they would believe that their constituents would see it as a fee, and like just kind of getting, so they don't get any kind of decrease in their taxes, and now they have a point of sale fee on paint, for example. So I, in a way, see that argument where the funding is no longer the burden of the municipality, but then the resident is still paying their taxes that currently pay for the system, and now they would have an additional fee at the point of sale. So I see that argument, but it is definitely different. And I think we can all make the case that there's a lot of pressures being put on where our tax dollars go. And so this would just allow tax dollars to be used for other things, as opposed to, it creates a new system for handling it instead of having our tax dollars be spent on it.
Right. And I guess you could argue that your trash, if you have a separate trash fee, or your property taxes may not need to go up as much as they would have if these things are out of the waste stream being dealt with separately. Yes, so
exactly,
make that argument. Okay, so I know you and I could probably talk trash all day long.
Definitely.
But for our average viewer, maybe not. So we'll wind things down here. But just quick last question, as far as if people want to learn more about this topic of product stewardship and extended producer responsibility, any suggestions on where they go to learn more?
Yeah, that's a great question and kind of great place to leave folks. So I would recommend going to the Massachusetts Product Stewardship Council website. So it's massrecycle.org, and then find the Product Stewardship Council page. Also in Massachusetts, we have an organization, it's a nonprofit organization called the Product Stewardship Institute, and they work at a national and even international level on assisting and analyzing these types of policies. And so they have, their website is full of resources. They also have, you know, a membership that you can access even more resources. And I definitely recommend for folks that are interested in engaging further on this to check out them as a resource as well. And again, that's the Product Stewardship Institute. And they happen to be based in Boston, but they are, again, they work in a much broader scope than Massachusetts.
All right. And then lastly, I guess I'll just make the point, if anyone's watching wants to support any of these bills that are being discussed in Massachusetts, to reach out to your local state representatives or senators or governor, and let them know you support this type of legislation, assuming you do. If you don't, then don't reach out. So,
we have some actions on our webpage, on the product stewardship page, specific to that.
Okay.
And our focus is mainly on working with local governments to get you know, like select boards to support this and tell their state representatives, and to kind of get more elected officials to understand that this would benefit their community.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Well, thanks again, Waneta, for your time, and appreciate you sharing your expertise.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Take care.
You too.